Good evening. Look at 2 Kings 16 to begin. Then we'll go back to Exodus 32, but 2 Kings chapter 16. Second Kings 16 is about Ahaz, King Ahaz, and there is an example there of the idolatry that we've been talking about from Ahaz. Look at 16, beginning in verse 2 Kings. I guess verse 10 is where I was trying to get to, maybe. When King Ahaz went to Damascus to meet Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, he saw the altar that was at Damascus, and King Ahaz sent to Uriah the priest a model of the altar and its pattern, exact in all details, and Uriah the priest built the altar in accordance with all that King Ahaz had sent from Damascus to Uriah. The priest made it before King Ahaz arrived from Damascus. When the king came from Damascus, the king viewed the altar. Then the king drew near to the altar and went up on it and burnt the burnt offering, his grain offering, and poured his drink offering, and threw the blood of his peace offerings on the altar. And the bronze altar that was before the Lord he removed from the front of the house, from the place between this altar and the house of the Lord, and put it on the north side of the altar. And King Ahaz commanded Uriah the priest, saying, on the great altar burn the morning burnt offering and the evening grain offering and the king's burnt offering and the grain offering with the burnt offering and all the people of the land and their grain offering and their drink offering, and throw on it all the blood of the burnt offering and all the blood of the sacrifice. But the bronze altar shall be for me to inquire by. Uriah the priest did this as King Ahaz commanded. And then it goes on to talk more and further about some of his exploits. Go over at chapter 18, verses 3 and 4. The third year, Hoshea the son of Elah, the king of Israel, Hezekiah the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. That's verse 1. And he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, according to all David his father had done. He removed the high places and broke the pillars and cut down the Asherah, and he broke the pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made, for until those days the people of Israel had made offerings to it. He trusted the Lord God of Israel, so that there was none like him among all the kings of Judah. So you have Ahaz, who seemed to lead the children of Israel astray, followed by his son Hezekiah, who was trying to do right. He tore down all of those places and tried to align himself with God and did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. Chapter 19, verse 18 is another verse. Verse 17, truly, O Lord, the kings of Assyria have laid waste the nations and their lands, and have cast their gods into the fire, for they were not gods, but the work of men's hands, wood and stone. Therefore they were destroyed. Again, I'll just highlight the fact that all of these things that were made by men's hands, whether it's wood or stone or metal or anything of that nature, uh, those will not last. And that's the statement made there in 2 Kings 18. Now let's go back to Exodus 32. And we're actually going to go back a little further than that, but if you'll go ahead and go there, because that's kind of where we've been landing to talk about this whole idea of idolatry and how it really is the highlight of chapter 32, because as Moses is on the mountain, the people request of Aaron to make them a golden calf, and he obeys their request, and he gathers their earrings and their gold and fashions from that a golden calf. And we'll get to that in just a little while. One of the things that we noticed last week is that there was a warning against idolatry that had been given to the people before this time. We're not sure exactly how Moses was coming back and forth or exactly what he was doing, but there's this delivery of what we call the Ten Commandments, and those are recorded in Exodus 20. So if you want to hold your finger at 32 and go back to chapter 20, you have there listed those that we call the Ten Commandments. And in those first few commandments is solid evidence that God forbade them to have any form of idolatry whatsoever. To make Him the number one, to make Him the only, to make sure that there is no other God, there is nothing that could be mistaken in any way for that which would be worshipped as you would worship the Lord God of Israel. So chapter 20, verse 1, and God spake all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Now notice verse 3. You shall have no other gods before me. Now, the word before really could be translated besides me. I am the only one. There shall be no other gods. I am the only one. Verse 4. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children of the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. So you have those first 3 of the 10 there that deal with basically this thing that's going on in chapter 32, which is making an idol for themselves. And so he's given them this declaration in the form of these 10 commandments already back in chapter 20, as Moses has received these on the mountain. As he's told in verse 21, now go down, that's chapter 19, verse 21, go down and warn the people lest they break through to the Lord to look and many of them perish. And I think Gary brought that particular part up last week about the idea of breaking through and actually going beyond that to touch the mountain. And so he set limits around the mountain. And so Moses comes down. Anyway, that seems to be what's taking place here in chapter 20. He comes down. He sets limits for them. He goes down to the people and he gave them these commands that God had already given him. So they are without excuse. It's not like they've just been delivered out of Egyptian bondage after all this time in bondage, and they've been surrounded by this idol worship of the Egyptians, and now they are thrown into this setting with nowhere to turn, and Moses has left them, and woe is me, and poor us, and we've been deserted, and it's not like that happened. Actually, what happened is God had provided, God had supplied, God was present. He had shown His presence in many ways, and specifically, He's there on that mountain. And now, the next thing in our study is this golden calf experience. Now, before we get into chapter 32 and following, any observations about what we've kind of talked about as little introductory remarks concerning how Israel is really being the idolatry really permeates their history. It's really significant in the history of Israel as you look back through the nation, this idea of idolatry. Any thoughts? All right, look at chapter 32. We have moved where Moses becomes the intercessor for the people. When God says, "I'm not going to put up with this; I'll just destroy them, and I can raise up a nation from you, Moses." And Moses becomes the intercessor then for the people. He intercedes, and then there is this. Somewhat puzzling, as I think we learned last week, the way that God chooses to punish the people, or at least the initial punishment for the people. And there is the grinding up, the burning, the grinding up of the idol, the gold, and making the people drink that. By the way, I think I was reading something earlier in the week, and it was talking about, from the Jewish history perspective, that a Jewish rabbi made some kind of statement, and I wasn't real clear about how he made the statement, or if it was a quote, or if it was something like that. But the statement was made by a Jewish rabbi of old that said, every correction from the Lord that was directed at the nation of Israel after this day was flavored by the gold of the calf. I thought that was quite an interesting remark, because it's one of those things that stuck in the history of the nation of Israel for sure, because of this initial idolatry that took place in the way that it was dealt with by Moses. So now Moses has broken the tablets, and he has to head back up that mountain. But there's this second kind of intercession that takes place at the very end of chapter 32, the beginning of chapter 33. And so let's just kind of pick up at the end of chapter 32, verse... We'll pick up at the end at verse 34. "But now go, lead the people to the place about which I have spoken to you. Behold, my angel shall go before you. Nevertheless, in the day when I visit, I will visit their sin upon them. Then the Lord sent a plague on the people, because he made the calf, because they made the calf, the one that Aaron made." I guess there's the accomplice idea. They made it, the one that Aaron made, so they were the accomplices. Maybe they're the driver from the hold-up or something. But yes, yeah, it is almost. I like the way you said that, because it sounded just like a father. It sounded just like a father correcting his children, because God is saying, you're in trouble because that golden calf that you made, the one that Aaron made. Yeah. So they are implicit. They are guilty in all of that. So look at 33, 1 through 6 now. Someone read that for me. 33, 1 through 6.
Then the Lord said to Moses, "Depart and go up from here, you and the people whom you have brought out of the land of Egypt, to the land which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, to your descendants I will give it. And I will send my angel before you, and I will drive out the Canaanite, and the Amorite, the Hittite, the Perizzite, and the Hivite, and the Jebusite. Go up to a land flowing with milk and honey, for I will not go up in your midst, lest I consume you in a way, for you are a stiff-necked people." And when the people heard this bad news, they mourned, and no one put on his ornaments. The Lord said to Moses, "Say to the children of Israel, you are a stiff-necked people. I could come up into your midst in one moment and consume you. Now therefore take off your ornaments, that I may know that you do what you do." So the children of Israel stripped themselves of their ornaments by Mount Horeb. Moses met with the Lord.
Okay, very good. Now God's given them this commandment to move forward. The understanding is move forward to that promised land, but it's not going to be without the baggage of what's taken place. Now, I read the end of the story in chapter 32, where God declares that there's going to be this visitation of sin upon the people. Somewhere in the future, somewhere down the line, there's going to be this judgment for this. But what takes place as Moses has this interaction with God is kind of it's a little bit puzzling conversation that Moses has. When you read verses 30 beginning, Moses has this conversation with God, and it's as if Moses says, well, let's just read it. So Moses, the next day, has come down from the mountain, and he says to the people, "You've sinned a great sin, and now I will go up to the Lord. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sin." So Moses returned to the Lord and said, "Alas, the people have sinned a great sin. They have made for themselves gods of gold. But now, if you will forgive their sin, but if not, please blot me out of your book that you have written." You see what Moses says? Forgive their sin, but if you don't, blot me out of your book. Blot my name from your book. Now, we'll come back to that, so hang on if you have some observations. But look what he says. "But the Lord said to Moses," verse 33, "Whoever sinned against me, I will blot out of the book. But now go, lead the people to the place about which I have spoken to you. Behold, my angel shall go before you. Nevertheless, in the day when I visit, I'll visit their sin upon them." So Moses, again, becomes this intercessor between the people, and he says, "Forgive them, God, but if you're not going to forgive them, then blot my name out of your book." What's the Lord's response? Well, his response is, no, I'm not going to blot anybody's name out that hasn't sinned, but those who have sinned, they're going to reap their reward. Those who have sinned. Immediately, when chapter 33 opens up, the Lord is giving Moses the instructions to move out, okay? Head toward that promised land. Let's move from here. Let's get out of here. Let's move. I'm ready to take my people to this promised land. Honestly, right now I'm thinking, God's thinking that we need to hurry and get them there or they're really going to mess up and miss their chance. We need to get them there. So Moses, saddle up, let's go. Let's get the people there. We've had enough of this for right now. Okay, so this puzzling statement by Moses, what does it sound like to you that's going on with Moses as he speaks to God about God's people, and as God speaks to Moses about Moses' people? And Moses really lays it out there. He really puts his relationship with God right out there, and he makes this statement. What are you thinking?
I think Moses was trying to, I don't know what his motive was, but God's letting him know in verse 33, I'm still God. I'll take care of those people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm still in charge.
I think you're right. I think that's exactly what he says. I'm going to do what I'm going to do because I'm God. You're not going to change that. Yeah.
Like Moses ready to throw up his hands.
There seems to be a sense of frustration for sure.
Well, it shows leadership too. Kind of, if he failed, he goes down with the ship.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like that leader who says, my people have failed, or my people are about to be wiped out, or my people are going to be punished. And if I can keep that from happening to them, I'll take whatever you dish out to me, God. Whatever you want to do it to me. And just
roundabout way, Moses is saying, I failed.
yes, I think yes.
He has a better grasp of the consequences of the people who do whatever the only thing. He has a better understanding of what their actions lead them to.
Yeah, Tamello makes the point that Moses probably, because of his relationship with God, being on the mountain, having been the one that received the law, been the one that has been the leader of the nation of Israel, he has a pretty good handle on the seriousness and the consequences of what's taking place, whereas the people just got a glimpse of it when he told the Levites to go kill. They just got a little glimpse of some of the seriousness of what has taken place here as they made this idol, and Moses knows that this is a serious thing, and God's going to deal with that very firmly. He's not going to just let that go. And Moses, I think, being the leader, feels responsibility, takes that opportunity to present himself before God and says, God, whatever, just take it out on me. No, I have a part in this. I was the leader. They did it on my watch. Do it to me. Whatever needs to be done.
It's a pretty bold statement to go, I'll trade me for them. And Moses is a type of Christ. In other words, there are so many things that would point to who Christ would be. But it's interesting that Moses makes that offer and God says, that's not how this works. The people who are guilty are the people who are held accountable. Except for, actually, in the end, that's not how it works. Because there is somebody to take that place. Just not Moses.
Right.
So that's interesting.
And not in this particular situation, because obviously Gary points out that Moses being this type of Christ, you might expect that God would say, yeah, I'm going to show the people, not only the people here, but I'm going to show everybody that reads this from here on out that you are a type of Christ, so I'm going to give you some punishment for the people. But that's not what God does here. he actually says the guilty are the ones that receive the punishment, which is actually not true, is it? Because when Christ comes, he takes our guilt, he takes our punishment for us. But Moses is one of those leaders at this point where he throws himself at the mercy of God. And you mentioned...
But that's also kind of the point, because the law of Moses doesn't make that provision.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Christ that has to come to do it. So that God is right. That's not how it works under the law.
Right. That's not the way things work here. I remember another man who did something very similar, or at least said something very similar, when Paul said that I would become lost if my people could be found. If my people could be saved, I would be lost. A similar attitude, I think, where I want more than anything to see those people that I care about. By the way, I think maybe Moses is beginning to love these people as much as he has great contempt for them at times, and he's ready to strangle them at times. I think he has reached that point where he has ownership. I mean, that shows ownership, doesn't it? I mean, there's nobody that has not invested themselves into a group of people that would approach God with that request. So I think he's invested himself in these people. Okay, any other observations? So when this happens, God's response is, Moses, go lead your people. Just get down there, go lead your people. I'm going to deal with this. I'm God. I'm the one that's in charge. I'm going to do my God thing, and you go lead the people. And you lead them to the place that I have spoken to you about. But now, verse 34, go lead the people to the place about which I have spoken to you. Behold, my angel will go with you. Conversation over, right? That's the end. That's it. That's enough. I'm God. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. The guilty are going to be punished. And by the way, God has given Moses, and Moses is going to deliver to the people, and very soon he's going to begin to deliver it to the people here in the book of Exodus, in the book of Leviticus. God has given them a way to have a relationship with God. Because what's going to happen when you get to the book of Leviticus is going to show how an unholy people can have a relationship with a holy God. That's what Leviticus is all about. Moses is leading an unholy people. We knew that, didn't we? Moses knows that. They're unholy people. God is holy. Can unholy people have a relationship with a holy God? Absolutely not. There is no way that unholy people can have a relationship with a holy God. But what God delivered to Moses was, here's how my people can become holy. There's the laying out of the priesthood. There's the instruction on all of the different kinds of sacrifices that are to be offered. There's a laying out of all of the different types of feasts that they are to partake of, and the different ways that they are to partake of that. There's the layout of the tabernacle, and everything that needs to be put into place is put into place by God to give these unholy people an opportunity to have a relationship with a holy God. And that's what Leviticus is all about. It is about people that need relationship with God and how they can do that in spite of being unholy. They can be made holy through the blood of the Lamb, through the sacrifices, through the feasts, through the priesthood, through the tabernacle, through all of those things that are the significance of having that relationship with God. God wants to dwell in their midst. He wants to be their God. He wants to make them His people. But they also then have to conform to what He has laid down now before Moses, as Moses is about to begin to deliver those things to the people. Actually, that's going to begin in chapter 35, where you have the end of chapter 34, Moses' shining face, and then you have the regulations that are going to begin to be laid out in chapter 34. You have the Ark of the Covenant in chapter 37, and the furniture of the tabernacle and the surrounding area of the tabernacle. You're going to pick that up in about chapter 37, 38, something like that. So that's what's about to take place. So Moses is going to move the people away from Sinai. And that's what happens in chapter 33, verses 1 and following, that John just read for us, as Moses is told by God, go on, get down off this mountain, go down there and lead your people to the place that I have told you about. And so now, verse 1 of chapter 33, he says to Moses, depart, go up from here, you and the people whom you have brought up out of the land of Egypt to the land of which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I'll give this to your offspring, and so forth. Now in chapter 32, when he tells Moses to go down and lead the people to the place that I've told you about, he doesn't give him those specifics. But now in chapter 33, when he tells him to move out, load up, get saddled up, get out of here, because I'm going to take my people, I'm going to escort my people to the land that I promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That specific land, that specific place that I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Chapter 33, was that about that's verse 1. And he promises to be with them. He promises to drive out the enemies. As a matter of fact, he specifically designates the enemies he will drive out. And I want you to go to, verse 3, this land which flows with milk and honey, I will not go up among you, lest I consume you on your way, for you are a stiff-necked people. God knew the people better than they knew themselves. He knew the people better than Moses knew the people. He knew exactly what was going to happen, and he describes them. By the way, this description of Israel got Stephen killed. Stephen described them as being stiff-necked and uncircumcised of heart and ears, and they stoned him. But God knows that these people are, and he describes them here as a stiff-necked people. By the way, what does that really mean when God describes Israel as being stiff-necked? What does that mean? Stubborn? Yeah. I heard Basil Overton one time say it means mule-headed. I guess that's stubborn. Yeah. That's very true. Tomello points out they've been in Egypt now for many generations, and as a result of that, they've got a lot of changing to do. They have belief systems, and they have an understanding that has to change. And I think the making of the golden calf and that history is evidence of that for sure. Mm-hmm. and maybe I was going to say that's the disastrous word. So here's what I see, Gary. You have this people who've now had this interaction with God Himself in a certain way, and Moses has been there, and Moses comes down reflecting the words of God and the commands of God, and then he says, I'm going to escort you to this land that flows with milk and honey, the land I promised your forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And oh, by the way, I'm not going to be with you. I'm not going to walk among you because you couldn't handle it. And maybe that's the disastrous word that you're talking about there, because it's like, what? The shock that would be like if Moses had come down and said, well, I'm not going to be your leader anymore. We're going to turn it over to Aaron, since y'all want to follow him more than you want to follow me. They're going to go, what? Yes. Sad, yes. Yeah.
Well, it's like you built a golden calf because you wanted a God with you. And now you've been shown God, but He can't be with you.
Yeah. So that, I think that's the sadness, and that they mourn. It is certainly a time of mourning for them. So verse 4, I think, illustrates that well.
I think Gary's right. God knows He's not through with them. He's not through with these people because they've just seen all these miracles. They've seen the Red Sea part. They've seen all this stuff, and then after they've sinned against God, they get 3,000 of them were killed. And yet He knows we're not through with these people. Mm-hmm. So that's what He said. That's stiff-necked. Yeah. That's definitely, I'm going to do it my way. God, you can do it your way, but my people are going to do it this way.
Yeah. Yeah, He knows that they're not through with their sinning yet. Somebody made a statement over here?
No, but I was wondering about the ornaments. That they were just good ornaments. What were these ornaments?
Well, they'd already given their earrings, unless they had more. That's what I'm thinking, that they had.
Maybe this was the silver.
Yeah, instead of the gold. Yeah. I think the ornaments would be the nose rings, the earrings, or whatever other kind of things they had that would be adornment. That I think that's what it's talking about.
This is what we can't have nice things.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
you can't have nothing. Yeah.
Later on in the chapter, Moses says, if your presence will not go with me, don't bring us up from here. Which is, God said, I'm going to take you, but I can't go with you or I can consume you. But then there's more intercession that takes place, and the question is, does God end up His presence going with him or not?
I think that he mentions the angel. He's going to send the angel to accompany them. The presence of God is going to be obvious. I think the presence is going to be very literal. I think they're going to be able to look and see. They're going to be able to experience that He is there. But there's a difference in being there and escorting them and being in their midst. And I think that seems to be maybe I'm straining the gnat, swallowing a camel, but it seems to me that God was not going to leave them without His presence. But what He wants to do is to dwell in their midst. And that would be walking with them and being present in the mass. But He can't do that. He sees that they will not be able to handle that. Okay, anything else? I think our time is up. Appreciate your comments.